Hi everyone, welcome back to my UGC NET Criminology lecture series. Today we are going to learn the topic called as terrorism and insurgency. When we hear the words terrorism and insurgency, we often think of violence, fear, and breaking news headlines. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, are these just random acts of violence, or are they part of something much more organized, strategic, and deeply rooted in society? Today, we are going to unpack these concepts in a way that not only helps you crack UGC NET but also makes you see global conflicts through a criminological lens. Let's begin with terrorism, a term that carries immense emotional and political weight. Terrorism is not just about violence, it is about creating fear as a psychological weapon. It involves a deliberate use of violence or threat to intimidate a population and influence government decisions. The real target is not always the immediate victim, but the larger audience watching in fear. A powerful example that shook the world is the September 11 attacks. On that day, coordinated attacks targeted civilian and symbolic structures, causing massive destruction and loss of life. But beyond the physical damage, the real impact was psychological. The entire world felt vulnerable. This is exactly what terrorism aims to do: amplify fear beyond the immediate act. Terrorism is highly organized. It involves planning, funding, recruitment, and ideological indoctrination. Groups often justify their actions through political, religious, or ideological narratives. Now let's move to insurgency, which is often confused with terrorism but is actually broader and more structured. Insurgency refers to an organized movement aimed at overthrowing or challenging a government. Unlike terrorism, insurgency often involves control over territory and sustained political struggle. It is not just about creating fear, it is about gaining power. A relevant example from India is the Naxalite Maoist insurgency. This movement originated from socio-economic inequalities, especially among marginalized tribal populations. The insurgents claimed to fight for land rights and social justice. However, they often use violent methods such as ambushes, bombings, and attacks on security forces. This shows how insurgency is deeply connected to structural issues like poverty, inequality, and lack of development. Here's where things become even more interesting: the overlap between terrorism and insurgency. While insurgents aim for political control, they often use terrorist tactics to achieve their goals. For example, bomb blast assassinations and attacks on civilians may be used to weaken the state's authority. However, not all terrorist acts are part of an insurgency. Some are standalone acts meant purely to spread fear without any intention of territorial control. Let's take another global example: the Sri Lankan Civil War. The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam functioned as an insurgent group seeking a separate state. At the same time, they used suicide bombings and targeted killings, classic terrorist tactics. This case perfectly illustrates how insurgency and terrorism can coexist within the same movement. Now let's understand the root causes. Why do people engage in terrorism or insurgency? Criminology does not see this as random behavior. Instead, it links these acts to deeper issues such as political exclusion, economic deprivation, ethnic discrimination, and identity crisis. When groups feel marginalized and believe that peaceful methods will not bring change, they may resort to violence. For example, many insurgents movements arise in regions where development is uneven and governance is weak. Similarly, terrorism can be fueled by radical ideologies that promise purpose, identity, and recognition to individuals who feel alienated. This is why radicalization is often a gradual process influenced by social, political, and psychological factors. Another major dimension today is technology and globalization. Terrorist organizations use social media for recruitment, training, and propaganda. Encrypted messaging apps allow them to operate secretly across borders. Insurgent groups also use technology for coordination and surveillance. This makes modern terrorism and insurgency far more complex and difficult to control. Let's now look at the impact on society, which goes far beyond immediate violence. Terrorism creates widespread fear, disrupts economies, and damages international relations. Insurgency, on the other hand, leads to prolonged instability, displacement of people, and breakdown of governance in affected regions. Civilians often become the biggest victims caught between state forces and armed groups. Government respond through counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency strategies, including military operations, intelligence gathering, strict laws, and international cooperation. In India, laws like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act are used to combat terrorism. However, criminologists emphasize that force alone is not enough. Long-term solutions require addressing root causes like inequality, lack of education, unemployment, and political exclusion. Before we wrap up, here is an important exam insight. UGC NET questions often focus on conceptual clarity. Remember, terrorism is about fear and psychological impact, while insurgency is about political control and rebellion. Understanding this overlap causes and real-world examples can give you an edge in your exam. So the next time you see a headline about violence, don't just read it. Analyze it. Ask yourself, what are the underlying causes? Is it terrorism, insurgency, or both? That's how you start thinking like a criminologist. And if you found this video helpful, stay connected, because coming up next we'll dive into practice questions, PYQs, and the revision strategies that will boost your UGC NET preparation to the next level. Please subscribe.